Hi, I'm David Brennan with the Sword of David Bible Prophecy Show, Prophecy in Politics. A lot of people don't know this, but experts, former FBI agents who were in major senior executive positions within the FBI, wrote a letter to Congress stating that military armies, large divisions of armies, entered the United States through the open southern border. Now we know during Mr. Biden's 4 years in office that at least 20 million people flooded into the United States through the border, and we don't even know who they are or where they went within our country. It's also true now President Trump has stopped the flow, but the damage has already been done in terms of the armies that were allowed to enter the United States. It's a very serious matter because enemy armies within the United States means that we're vulnerable to attack in terms of our infrastructure, mass gatherings, things of that nature, if we get into entangle with China, for example. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into what those 10 FBI agents talk about. But my point is this. It's not just that there's a threat to the United States that's now internal, and I'm sure President Trump is trying to address it. The problem is, where are these people? And the experts say there's many of them, tens of thousands, that represent a literal terrorist army from the Middle East and a Chinese army within the United States. No, they did not come in military vehicles or in military fatigues carrying weapons. That wasn't their plan. They came in with the rest of the flood coming into the country, all of which is obviously part of a much bigger plan. But the prophetic significance of this is that it is setting the stage for a prophecy given by the prophet Isaiah several thousand years ago that indicated, quote, those from faraway lands would eventually attack the nations that they enter. And this would be right at the opening stage of the end times. So we're going to get into that. We're going to take a look at that and a lot more. We're going to look at his prophecy here in a minute. And you decide for yourself if the prophecy fits with what I'm talking about. That's up for you to decide. And then I'm going to get into a letter sent by 10 former senior executive FBI agents to the Congress back in January of 2024. And what it has to say is startling concerning the threat that has entered the border. Now, the prophet Isaiah is a major biblical prophet. This is a prophecy in Isaiah chapter 13. I'm going to read it to you, and we're going to talk about different parts of it. Let me just make one thing clear. I like to take Bible prophecy as literally as possible because it eliminates the ability of men to impart their own beliefs into the words of the prophets. It's the safest route to go. Now, when he starts off his prophecy in Isaiah 13, he starts off talking about ancient Babylon. That's the first 3 verses he talks about that. What he's doing, and what the prophets will frequently do, is they will compare an event yet to take place to events that took place in the past. So he starts off talking about ancient Babylon, but that's just the first 3 verses. Then he immediately switches to the end times. And I'm going to show you how we know he's talking about the end times. Let's start getting into it now. And you decide if this is a correct division of this scripture and if it applies to what has taken place at that southern border where enemy armies have entered the United States. In verse 4, he starts talking about the noise of a multitude in the mountains, that of many people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms and nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts musters the army for battle. Why is this army in the mountains? The mountains are a place of hiding. They're not out in the open. They're hiding in the mountains. The armies that entered the United States through the southern border, the Islamic terrorist army that entered, the Chinese army that entered. We're going to get into what the experts say about this. Don't take my word that this happened. Okay, I'm going to quote a China expert. I'm going to quote 10 former senior executive FBI agents. I'm even going to quote President Trump. He made mention of it. So Isaiah starts off now talking about, he shifts immediately to the end times. He's talking about a gathering in the mountains, okay? A gathering in the mountains. This army is hiding in the mountains. We're going to find out in a minute why it is right at the end times. And then he says, and where they come from? Quote, they come from a far country, from the end of heaven. The Lord and his weapons of indignation to do what? Destroy the whole land. This is an army that comes from a far country. In other words, these are people that enter other countries from faraway lands. Just look at what has happened to the United States through the open southern border, which was done on purpose. This is part of a plan, a globalist plan to take over the United States from within, but it's also taking place in Western Europe. Western Europe has experienced the same kind of invasion. The other interesting aspect of this all is that the prophet Daniel foretold that the beast kingdom, when it rises up in the earth, would be, quote, different from all kingdoms before it. Is that difference that he attacks from within nations? That would be a major difference. Anyway, we see, that's for speculation, we see the stage has been set for them to attack not just the United States but Western Europe, because they have already gathered from within. Now, the prophet tells us, well, when is this going to take place? And that's key. He says, wail, for the day of the Lord is at hand. The day of the Lord is the technical term for what we popularly refer to as the end times. It's the day of the Lord. It's the day of the Lord's wrath against the world. It will come as destruction from the Almighty. Now, this is the thing, though. The day of the Lord, being the end times, lasts a number of years. So we now need to know when during the end of the day of the Lord does this happen? When during the end times does this happen? He tells us that as well. He goes, every man's heart will melt and they will be afraid. Pangs and sorrows will take hold of them, and this is the key. They will be in pain as a woman in childbirth. That is called a prophetic birth pangs term. The Lord is very specific. The day of the Lord is the end times from start to finish, okay? From start to finish. If you do a study on the day of the Lord, you will see that that is the case. It's the time of his wrath. But interestingly, there's a beginning phase to the end times, to the day of the Lord. It's called birth pangs. Why is it called that? Because it births the end times. Birth pangs are a very tumultuous time. The description of birth pangs by the prophets, Jesus being one, Matthew 24 and Luke's version, talks about when birth pangs begin, there's going to be wars all over the earth. There's going to be these mega earthquakes. Luke says great earthquakes. The word there is megas, but we get our word mega. Enormous earthquakes all over the earth. There'll be massive pestilence, famines all over the place when birth pangs launch. Birth pangs, when they're finished, they will produce what's called the 7-year tribulation. So birth pangs are the beginning of the day of the Lord, okay? So this is telling us that the attack by those from, quote, faraway countries will take place when? At the beginning of the end times. So obviously, for that to take place, they have to be within the countries before the end times launch. So what we're seeing is the stage being set, not just in terms of these armies coming within Western nations that have been too strong militarily to be attacked from the outside with any success. So the enemy, the globalist, the New World Order, what I believe is the biblical beast kingdom, different, just as Daniel said it would be, from any other kingdom where it works within nations to take them over from within. That's different. There's never been such an entity in the history of the world. And now we see the power it exerts. It is so powerful, it has been able to convince politicians in Europe and the United States to leave their borders wide open, to be invaded. Talk about power. Well, okay, now how serious is this situation? We see what Isaiah says. We took a look at that. We see where he talks about how, first he starts off talking about ancient Babylon. That is true for the first 3 verses. But prophets do that. They'll reference back to an event in the distant past for comparison purposes to an event that's going to happen in the future, okay? So that's what he does. He starts off with that. But then he immediately talks about this army, and it's a gathering army hidden within the mountains. And he talks about where they come from. They come from a faraway country. They come from faraway lands into the countries that we're then told they're destined to attack. I'll tell you what else is very interesting. It then tells us what happens after the attack. Naturally, in a place like the United States, where so many people have weapons, so many homeowners are gun owners, that when the attack takes place from within, there's going to be a response on the part of the people within these countries. Isaiah covers that as well. And he talks about it. He says, and this is concerning those who came into the country to attack. It shall be as the hunted gazelle and as the sheep that no man takes up. Gazelles being hunted, they are fleeing. A sheep that no man takes up is totally vulnerable. He goes on, he says, listen to what they do. This is the people who came in, the armies that came into the United States. Every man will turn to his own people, and everyone will flee back to his own land. They who come from a faraway country and plant themselves within the United States and Western Europe, even after they attack, eventually they will have to flee back to their own lands because of how difficult it's going to become for them to stay in the nations that they attack. Okay, now let's take a look at what 10 former senior executive FBI agents had to say concerning the threat level in the United States, and it will blow you away what they have to say. It blew me away when I got my hands on the letter. The letter, by the way, is posted at the website swordofdavid.com, and you can read it for yourself. It was in the news, not big in the news. You had to go looking for it naturally, but we're gonna now take a look at what they have to say, and it's gonna blow you away, and you're gonna see how this is all fitting in, even their letter, to the words of the prophet, setting the stage for his words to unfold. So we're going to take a look now at what those 10 former senior executive FBI agents had to say in their letter sent to Congress in January of 2024. It's a real eye-opener. I'm going to read some excerpts from it. You're going to hear directly from them. And these are people who know what they're talking about. They're not people that loosely delve into conspiracy theories or whatever. This is reality I'm giving to you. And then you see if it fits with what Isaiah warned was going to happen at the opening scene of the end times. So as we know, the stage has to be set for that to happen. But let's take a look at it. As former senior executives of the Federal Bureau of Investigation with deep experience combating dangers to the nation, we write to express our concern about a current specific threat that may be one of the most pernicious ever to menace the United States. That says a lot in itself. Consider the history of the United States and all the challenges that we faced as a nation, and they're saying this may be the most dangerous one yet. And certainly, because the armies have entered the United States, I think it is the most dangerous one, and that's why I'm bringing this to your attention. Let's read on. The threat we call out today is new and unfamiliar. It certainly is new, isn't it? We've never had armies allowed within our country. In its modern history, the U.S. has never suffered an invasion of the homeland, and yet one is unfolding now. This is them saying it. Military-aged men from across the globe, many from countries or regions not friendly to the United States, this happened in Europe too, are landing in waves on our soil by the thousands, not splashing ashore from a ship or parachuting from a plane, but rather by foot across a border that has been accurately advertised around the world as largely unprotected and ready to grant access. It certainly had been ready during Biden's 4 years to grant that access. as part of a much broader plan. That's all that was. And they set the stage. They didn't count on President Trump getting back in office, and it certainly explains why they made an effort to kill him, to use lawfare against him, to stop him, because he would stop the growing army within the United States. Let me read some more. It would be difficult to overstate the danger represented by the presence inside our borders of what is comparably listen to this, a multi-division army of young single adult males from hostile nations and regions whose background, intent, and allegiance is completely unknown. They're talking, these 10 former senior executive FBI agents are talking about multiple military divisions in the United States. Multiple. They go on to say, they say quite a bit. One of great significance, which you'll appreciate. In 2021, the demographics of those entering the porous southern border started to shift. What a shock. In 2021, oh, you mean when President Biden took over? Yes. The demographics just mysteriously changed. In other words, our enemies knew we got the green light to go in. Young men from around the world traveling alone and holding questionable motivations dramatically increased in number to become the most common profile of those breaching this nation's borders. A startling number had been found on the terrorist watch list. It changed just when Biden took over. Now, we know Biden didn't run a thing. Somebody else did. We found out recently that all these executive orders he issued, every one of which weakened the United States, was done by that auto pen. Whether or not they're legal or not, that's, I guess, worth conversation one day. But somebody else is running it. George Soros, I'll give you that name. Some other dark characters around the world. It is stark to say, but having a large number of young males within our borders who could begin attacking gatherings of unarmed citizens in imitation of the Israeli attack at the behest of a foreign group, and they go on to say, what a serious matter that is to have that. It's not just terrorists, though. Gordon Chang, a China expert, the guy really knows his stuff about China. Let me tell you, he flat out said on Maria Bartiromo's show that the big issue today is that through our open southern border, this is during the campaign for presidency in 2024, while Biden was still in office, he said, quote, a Chinese army has entered the United States and continues to enter, which explains why China invested so much money in bridges and roads in Central America to have their army come in. President Trump, at a campaign stop, pointed out, quote, what are we seeing? Is China bringing an army into the United States? He knows what's going on. Look, I bring this to you because the sword of David shoots straight on threats to our country and on what fulfills Bible prophecy or is setting the stage to do so. So I would encourage you, if you're of a mind that you want this type of very literal Bible prophecy coinciding with some perspectives on politics and how it fits in, it's kind of prophecy in the news today, the way things are going, hit that subscribe button and I'll keep it coming to you. And you'll always get a perspective on the political events that are happening that could in some manner relate to Bible prophecy. Now, what else you'll notice is this. I take the prophets very literally, and I do not agree with a number of these people who talk about Bible prophecy. They're making statements about things that they claim are happening that actually are not happening, and they're ignoring some things that actually are taking place, like the invasion of the southern border. So consider subscribing. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and I hope this has been informative. God bless you.